My name is Lisa Richardson, and I am a co-leader of the State College chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, along with Sylvia Neely. And I'd like to have the honor here and take a moment to introduce our speaker today, who is Noel Smyth. Noel is the head of product for the World Resources Institute Data Lab team. He works to further develop the Data Lab's suite of geospatial data products, including Resource Watch, Global Forest Watch, Global Forest Watch Pro, Forest Watcher, and the emerging Land and Carbon Lab work. Prior to joining the World Resources Institute, Noel held technology leadership positions at JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, leading technology transformation initiatives for those organizations. His work also included sustainability initiatives as part of the corporate green teams. Prior to his technology career, he spent time as a civil engineer designing bridges. Noel holds a BS in civil engineering from the Pennsylvania State University, an MS in information technology from Drexel University, and a Master of Liberal Arts in Sustainability from Harvard University. He also serves as the volunteer leader of the Delaware County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and is a qualified ambassador for En-ROADS presentations. With Noel's distinguished career in technology and sustainability, we are honored to have him lead us through this evening's presentation of En-ROADS, an interactive climate simulation model. Noel, thank you for being here and take it away.
Oh, thank you for that kind introduction, Lisa, and welcome everyone to our webinar tonight. And we're going to go through a really powerful climate tool called En-ROADS, developed by MIT and Climate Interactive. And but before we want to do that, I guess we want to just run a little poll to just learn a little bit about the audience. So, John, if you would just put up the first question, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. Just want to see where folks are from tonight. Okay. All right, good. We have a lot of showing from Central PA. Go Penn State, alma mater. All right, I guess we can close that question. Do we have a second question, John? Or let's share the results. And yeah, so we're mostly Central PA, a little bit of Eastern, a little bit of Western, but pretty much Central PA. All right, let's bring up the second question, if you would. Oh, maybe a little soon for that one. Let's let me go through a little of the demo, and then I'll bring that one up. Is that all right, John?
Yeah, that'd be the policy one.
Yeah. So let's let me walk through the introduction to the climate tool En-ROADS, and then when we get into actually using the tool, we'll ask folks what the policy think they want to try out tonight. So let me share my screen and get going here. All right, put it in present mode. All right, great. So as I noted, this is developed by Climate Interactive along with MIT's Sustainability Initiative. You have my introduction, and tonight's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the tool, introduce it. We're gonna go through scenarios to figure out together, like what are the policies that we could put in place if we were, let's say, the grand ruler of the world, and we could put policies in place across the entire globe, because again, this is a global simulator. So if we had that opportunity to do that, what scenarios or which climate policies are most effective? I think that's really what this tool helps us do. We're going to spend some time talking about impacts. This tool really spends some resources looking at the various impacts that we can have as well, and then we'll do a debrief. But part of it is like, I think most folks are associated with Citizens Climate Lobby here tonight. What I want you to think about tonight as we go through this, like how would I use this tool to either educate the staffers or member of Congress on what policies are effective, or or even educate them on like what are some of the impacts of either the policies or the lack of policies, and you know, just to create dialogue, but also, you know, get them to take some action, you know, where required. So a little bit about En-ROADS. It's a fast tool. It's powerful. It helps us to understand, you know, what different policy levers can do in terms of making an impact to the road that we're on. So we'll get to look at energy use, consumption, different policies. It can help decision makers and investors understand which of those will have the greatest impact. I mentioned it's a global model. So again, it would be really complex to build a model that said, well, what if this country did this and what if this country did that, and how would that affect it? So this is done at a global level. Again, it's meant to be fast and simple to use, but it's also very deep and powerful. You can really, as we'll get into in a few minutes, build simulations that go as complex as you like, but also you can do them pretty simple as well. It's a really effective communication, presentation, and analysis tool. All the equations are posted on the tool, so it's transparent, super flexible. You can change the assumptions. They tell you all the assumptions that are in the model, and if you're a researcher and you have different assumptions that you want to try as to how this is going to go, you can change those as well. It's like I said, it's highly aggregated to be super fast. It's complementing, not replacing, you know, the other more detailed models that are out there. And again, it's for discussions, and to learn and strategize, and not, it's not to predict, you know, it's really directionally accurate, I would call it, to say which policies work more effectively in place. So this is what it looks like. You can see it's got a fairly intuitive interface, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. Runs in pretty near time, but let's briefly look at some of the science. And I know everyone here is familiar with this, but I'm just going to breeze through it. That atmospheric CO2 is higher than it's been in a really long time. This is going back 800,000 years or so, and you can see pretty cyclical pattern until something happened in the last 100 or so years. And look what happened. There's a lot of emissions for different types of fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas primarily, but then also you see the land use change at the top, and then the other in the middle there, which the other is the F gases, as they call them. But you can see the emissions from fossil fuels are the largest driver. Land use and forestry is a driver, methane's a driver, and some of the other greenhouse gases. And of course, the global temperature is going up, and this is what the model looks like. And we have now a target goal, and this is going to be our goal in the simulator, is to see if somehow through putting global policies in place, we can keep that temperature in the year 2100 down below 2, or somewhere between 1.5 and 2. The closer to 1.5, the better, as you know. That's what science tells us, that things get kind of crazy above 1.5 and really kind of unlivable beyond that, and that's Celsius, as you know. So that's the basic science, and I'm going to now jump into this policy simulator to walk through what it can do. And I call these levers. This is like a worksheet going through the model. I'll bring up the tool in a minute, but these are all the levers that we have in place in terms of the policy, the policies that we can look at. So we can encourage or discourage certain production of fossil fuels like coal, oil, natural gas, and things. We can encourage renewables. We can put a carbon price in place, which I think some of us are familiar with, and we'll talk about that in a bit. New technology is one there as well, like, you know, some unknown, you know, maybe some other cheap source of electricity that does not emit greenhouse gases could be discovered. So they model that too. They look at land use change, deforestation and afforestation, which is planting new trees. I know we've heard a lot of policies around that. So you can see, you know, it's got electrification, efficiency, methane. It's really trying to encompass all of the big levers, the things that are typically out there, and you can see they're all out here as well. So let's jump into the tool, and I'm going to walk through how this tool works, and let's just bring that up. All right, let me share my screen again with the tool. Okay, so as I noted, there's a number of levers, and the first thing I'm gonna show you here is that under each, see these are easily slidable if you want to move them, you know, to tax coal or to subsidize coal, which I'm not sure why you would do that, but under each of the levers, you can hit the three dots, and you can see it really goes through all of the assumptions that are in that lever, and you can do a really detailed policy analysis for each of the levers that are in there. They give you all kinds of leeway to go ahead and do that. And you can see we even have coal carbon capture and storage is one that's out here as well. So if we wanted to, you know, simulate that, that's available as well. So it's a really simple tool, but it's really deep and complex. It can be as deep and complex or as simple as you want it to be. And we'll stay relatively simple tonight because it would take about an 8-hour discussion to get deep into all of these policy tools. But the sliders really do give you the directionally accurate view. And each one of these also has this help feature, which if you hit that here as well, it talks through what that lever is. So examples, you could discourage coal through government policies and what have you. And so there's a number of yeah, so these are really interesting to read and spend time looking at different ways that these levers can help shape the policy. So we've got it generally in the energy supply, the transport sector, buildings and industry, land and industry emissions, and carbon removal technologies, and natural. So if you ever hear the term nature-based solutions, that's a buzzword that you hear a lot today. This is where you would use nature-based solutions to help remove some carbon as well. And then I didn't touch on growth yet, but you can also put in policies to change growth through either population or economic growth. I'll just tell you my personal preference is to, I don't really touch those because they're different connotations with trying to, let's say, constrain population growth or constrain economic growth has a number of different implications. So personally, I try to stay away from them, but you're more than welcome to, you know, put policy scenarios in place that do those as well. So these are the levers. And again, under each one, there's tons of information and help as to do it. And we're going to pretty much run through the sliders tonight as we try to simulate some of these. So then we have, well, a number of graphs that we can look at. So different components. This is the global source of primary energy. You can see the renewables is a nice green one here. And the fossil fuels are the rest. And you can see the burning of fossil fuels leads to an unlivable planet. And this is what we're trying to change this mix, to change this graph to make it go the other way. You can see just simply, let's build more renewables, the temperature goes down. So that's cool. We just incentivize the renewables. So that's one of the ways that we might do that. But we can change these graphs. You can see there's a number of different ones we can to look at. And again, these are all put here to help you look at it in different ways. I love these buttons at the top. I can always reset back to my default graphs. And if I just changed a bunch of things here and want to get back quickly to, you know, reset all the policies, I can just say reset policy assumptions, and it goes back to normal. So I use this a lot when we're toying around to kind of, they're like my come back home buttons, if you will. So again, there's clicks for this as well. Reset policies, reset assumptions, reset them both. you've got the different graphs, return to default graphs. You can pick any of the graphs here, but I prefer to just click on them here. And then the view, you got the main graphs, you have what's called the Kaya graphs, which is a number of different graphs. And again, you can see as these change as well, we can see how these change different components, right? Again, reset, let's go back home. Reset my policies, but you can see there's different ways. There's also this view of miniature graphs where you're basically showing everything at once if you wanted to do that. And again, I'll just move randomly some things and you can see the graphs all change dynamically right in front of you. So really powerful tool and easy to use and just tons of information that you can bring forward to do that. We also have the replay last change, kind of a neat one to do if you wanted to pull up different views and see how something changed that lever or change the graph you're looking at. So let's just do the coal one and see how that did it. We'll just say we'll replay that last change and you can just view the graphs. If you want to bring up different graphs, you can do that and just look at the graphs as the coal policy is put in place. So that's kind of neat to just, you know, kind of play it back for yourself. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pause here for a minute and take any questions about the tool itself before we get into any scenarios. Any questions just about the En-ROADS tool, and then we'll get into playing games with it. Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
Thanks, Noel. Sorry if you said this already, but when you hit the reset button and it goes back to this 3.6 by 2100, is that the current status quo or is that just a random?
Oh,
thing?
yeah. Yeah, great question. That's the current status quo is, and I say status quo, that's like the current policies that are in place globally. If followed to what the policy states, it would end up being 3.6. And I will share with you, it used to be 4.1 when I first learned this tool, and then they updated it based on maybe a year and a half ago, they updated it based on the new policies and it came down to 3.6. So there is some reasons to be optimistic in that the policies that the world are putting into place are actually moving the needle. So it's gone down 0.5 degrees Celsius since this model was launched. So great question though. Yeah. Gary?
Yeah. This is a really cool tool. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. So I know you mentioned earlier that it's just for global simulation.
Yes.
But I noticed when you were going through some of the graphs, there were some per capita breakdowns. So all of that's like per capita averaged around the world, right?
Yeah, there's some graphs as well that look at regions, and I'll show you them when I get into the impact section. So, but yeah, the per capita is generally globally, but the impacts they do break it out into, and I'll show the impacts in detail as we go through this. They break some of those out into regional impacts. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it would be interesting to see if you know, like so in America we're such a heavy consumer economy, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the stuff that we're consuming is actually being produced in Asia.
Mm-hmm. Sure thing, yeah.
China, for example, and in a lot of ways, sometimes a lot of ways that means we're really just exporting our carbon production footprint to another country, right?
Certainly are.
It would be interesting to see if there. I wonder if En-ROADS has a way to incorporate, like, what would happen if standard of living was actually a little bit more equitable around all of the countries of the world, right? So that things are localized instead of being shipped all the way halfway around the planet. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
No, you make complete sense. Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is like as we consume. As I guess more wealthy economies consume product that are produced for them in other economies, you're really in kind of in greenhouse gas emissions speak, that's your scope 3 emissions. So as a company, like if you were to calculate your personal or organizational greenhouse gas emissions, they break it into scope 1, 2, and 3. And their scope 3 is exactly that. It's like the supply chain emissions that are being produced to run the operation or your life as you are. So yeah, it's real. And much of the emissions that are occurring in other parts of the world that produce our goods for us are produced on our behalf. And certainly we are accountable for them as well.
And a quick follow-up, is there a setting to look for supply chain emissions footprints in En-ROADS?
No, it's not a supply chain tool. This is really, nope. Yeah, great question though. It's part of my day job. Yeah. Yeah. Any another question? Did you have a question, Lisa, or no? Was it?
Actually, that was the direction that you answered was what I was wondering about too, just kind of more specifically, not regions, but by country. Could you do this simulation by country to see the impacts? Okay.
No, I guess that would be, I guess the answer, is it feasible? I suppose, yes. It would be highly complex. And I'm sure some of the other models do that, just that, but I will say the baseline, someone asked about the baseline temperature of 3.6 C that's here now. That is a compilation or a model of all of the policies that are in place in every country to get to that. And so that's taken into account. But for us to have a model that responds instantaneously, yeah, they just have to apply it at the global level. Yeah. John?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask what you mentioned that did the En-ROADS team take into account like the IRA, the passage of the IRA and a couple other bills that recently passed the US Congress?
It's a good question, John. I think they're either working on that or they could be in here, but yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to see if they've actually, this release of it has that in there already. Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do, John, if you could put up the second question, because we're gonna go ahead and dive into like policy. We're gonna try some, and so I just wanted to poll the room and kind of see what the some of the policies they want to test are, or what do they think will work. And I'm guessing this room is going to be pretty good about picking the right one. Yeah. Not the right one, the most effective one. Okay. Yeah, maybe that poll was carbon capture. There you go. We got another vote. Thanks for that. Okay. All right, well, let's go. Yeah, you want to go ahead and end the poll, John, and publish it. Yeah. So the large majority of folks say carbon pricing is the most effective. And I guess since you're all in CCL, you probably already know that. But this tool is a really great tool to help show that to people. Yeah. And in fact, I've gotten almost like accused of saying, when I showed it to someone, they're like, "Wow, is Citizens Climate Lobby part of building this tool? Because it shows your answer." And I'm like, no, we're friends with them, I guess. But this was built independent of Citizens Climate Lobby, and we advocate for carbon pricing because, well, it actually is the most effective policy. So let's try a couple policy tools that are in the toolbox here. I know we said we're going to do carbon pricing, and I'll do that. And so I'll slide this all the way to the right. That's effectively very close to the simulation of our carbon fee and dividend. And I could go in and model that exactly and come up with a very within 0.1 C of the answer if I modeled it exactly. But to be honest with you, we don't know if our policy would be exact anyway. So this is pretty close to saying this is what our carbon price would do. But I don't know if you saw like what that did, but it moved from 3.6 to 2.6 with just that one policy. Okay, so that's pretty good result right away. All right, so let's test out a couple other policies. And the other thing is, I'll mention the order in which you put the policy in place will impact how much that policy has effect just because of the system dynamics behind different policies and how they would interact. You know, as you might imagine, if we put taxes on all the fossil fuels, then the carbon price might have similar but different effect. Yeah. So let's just do that. Let's. I just want to demonstrate to you. Let's put a heavy tax on coal and oil and gas, and just to show like it didn't move the needle. And we'll also incentivize renewables, and we're still at 3C. So interestingly enough, even if you tax very heavily coal, oil, natural gas, the carbon price is still a more effective tool by a lot. So that's a really interesting kind of realization as you go through this tool as well. And yeah, let's bring it out to the audience. Someone raise their hand and give me another idea of a policy, because we know we need, we're going to put a carbon price in, right? Let's put the carbon price in. And now let's try to get to as close to 1.5 as we can. What do you want to try, Gary?
Oh, I was going to ask if we know what like the Paris Accords were suggesting for each of these sliders.
I don't know that off the top of my head. Yeah, I think someone built a model for the Paris Accord. Yeah. Actually, I think the the model represents policies that are in place. Yeah, not the accord per se. Yeah. Who wants to help me with the next policy, because we're not there yet? What else?
Electrification.
All right, transport or buildings?
Let's try buildings.
Try buildings. Okay, we're going to go ahead and electrify buildings. Okay, that was good. We got another 0.1.
Carbon removal.
Carbon removal. Technological.
Yes.
Direct air capture. Okay. Well, that helps for sure. I call that a wish as well. So hopefully that happens.
Energy efficiency is a low-hanging fruit.
On buildings or transport?
Buildings.
Buildings. Oh, what did that do? Did anyone notice that? What happened?
Long term really brought it down.
Long term, it didn't make much of an effect on the temperature, but it really had an effect on the use of energy. Just look at the left graph and the right graph as we replay that. Less renewables got built because we needed less energy. But overall, we didn't affect fossil fuels much at all. We just said we need to build less energy. So that's good. There could be a cost implication. We'll get into that in a few minutes, but it didn't actually move the needle much on the temperature. Other ideas? And it's an important one, John. We'll get back to that. So should we do anything else?
Plant more trees.
Sorry.
Plant more trees. Yeah, let's do that. I love trees. It's part of my day job too. So we're going to plant a whole bunch of trees. Basically, right now, we're planting pretty much trees everywhere in the world where you can plant a tree. That's what that slider just did. So everywhere in the world that we can plant a tree is getting a tree planted. Okay, so that's just to show you the scale of that, and that moved the needle a little bit. But it's probably not.
Can we
Yeah.
prevent some of the Amazonian deforestation?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's protect the rainforests. Awesome. We're down to 2. This is good news. Can we get to, yeah.
What, this is Sylvia. What's we hear a lot about in the news is electric vehicles.
Mhm.
So let's
try
see
it.
what that happens.
Yep, it's moving us down too. We're getting closer, 1.9. And I guess we want to make them efficient. Should we do that? Let's do that. But going to electric vehicles is going to make them efficient anyway. We're down to 1.8. And what else do you want to try?
Or nuclear.
Nuclear. What did that do? more nuclear meant less renewables, but it didn't actually mean less fossil fuels per se. So let's just leave the nuke alone. Again, that's another lightning rod. Kathy, would you like to give us our next policy?
You're muted, Kathy.
Kathy, you're muted if you're trying to speak. There we go.
We can't hear you, Kathy. You're still on mute. If you want to maybe try to type it. And so am I looking at the chat?
How about reducing methane?
Yeah, methane's a really good one, John. So this is land use changes, methane and other gases. So this is the F gases. So if we want to make an effect here, we can highly reduce methane, and there we got it. We're 1.5 by the end of the century. Pretty cool, right? And I guess, yeah. What do people think about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So as far as like with carbon removal, right? You have technological, so that could be, you know, direct air capture or other forms.
Yeah.
So, but it has afforestation, but that falls within the nature-based solutions.
That's right.
But that's only one form. I mean, there's, you know, the kelp forests, and, you know, there's a number of various options under that. So it's as these different, not just nature-based, but technological, you know, responses and are developed, that will increase the impact. But just curious why it was broken out as just, you know, afforestation.
Well, I guess that was the policy that was most talked about. I'm just going to see if there's other land use changes that they had here, but yeah, they don't really talk about the kelp one that you mentioned. I think they picked most of the policies that would have the highest impact. So that's how they ended up with these, and the ones that were mostly considered in different, you know, areas of the world. Yeah.
Interesting.
Thanks for that question.
No, Kathy asked, what about population decline in the chat?
You want to put a policy for that? Okay. Didn't really help, so I'm gonna move it back. Yeah.
She also asks in the chat about agriculture.
Yeah, that's over here, and this is land and industry emissions. So the ag stuff is primarily in this methane and other gases. So this is related to agriculture, and waste emissions, energy and industry emissions, other greenhouse gases. So really, this is the ag one here, is the ag and waste emissions.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it doesn't consider the input of energy resources used in monoculture and our modern agricultural system. It does say fertilizers, that's a big one. But just our way of feeding ourselves uses a lot more, you know, resources and emits greenhouse gas emissions, you know, compared to eating simpler plant-based diets, eating more food directly as opposed to feeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they do include those as examples. So here's some of the examples of how you can, you know, policies that you can put in place that would reduce methane and some of the other gases related to agriculture. So decrease meat consumption, modified agricultural practices. Yeah, so there's some of the ones. Decrease from landfills. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I see it now, and I wasn't reading the fine print.
What about policies, if that's possible, around reducing food waste?
Yep, that's in here as well. That's part of this. I believe. Yeah. So increased. This includes the emissions from, I think, landfills as well. Yeah.
Would
So
that
yeah,
be-
basically that's methane, and you'd have to figure, come out with like how much methane, what percent of that you're going to reduce through your policy, and you can simulate that in this tool.
would
No,
that be right?
I think one of the most interesting things that I learned from this this tool is the issue of time. So, for example, if you imagine a new zero carbon industry or even afforestation, time comes into it.
Sure does.
And so, I like to look at the other graph on the left, to look at the one with that, what's it called? It's the global sources of energy, not area, but the lines. And you can really see, yeah, we go. You can still really see in that one when you have policies that take time to develop. So, afforestation, for example, if you go back on that and then bring it forward and see what happens. It's not working, is it? Nothing.
Well,
it's not doing much.
Afforestation is not affecting the energy sources.
Right.
You can see it's sequestering carbon into the ground, so it's making a difference in the temperature by taking carbon out of the air, but it's not changing the energy mix. That's correct.
Right, and it doesn't really kick in. If you look at the line
Correct.
to the right, it doesn't really kick in until really late.
That's correct.
In the process.
Till the second half for the century, or third.
Yeah, but if you try the new zero carbon, some new technology, that one will show the time, I think, very well also.
Did you see that shift? Let me replay that for you. So you can see if you get some new zero carbon, it's going to basically reduce your renewables and increase that new technology, but it's not going to change the dynamic on temperature. So what that tells us is, guess what? We already have that new technology. It's called renewables. We just got to do it. Yeah. Gary,
and it shows too that it doesn't really kick in until at least in the 2050s.
Yeah.
Because it takes so long to develop the technology and to get it up to industrials, that get the industry up and get people to buy it. So it takes a while.
You got it. Yeah, Gary, go ahead. Or Eric.
I got two questions.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Gary.
So is new zero carbon, is that like a hypothetical technology, like maybe like fusion or something like that? Is that what that means?
Yeah. So here's the new, it's basically like a thorium-based nuclear fission per se. So yeah, it's I call it a wish, maybe a prayer.
Yeah.
And
then the other one, I guess this is kind of related to my earlier question. If you go back to the main screen, so here we have like a policy where we're preserving the Amazon, right, with highly reduced deforestation, and at the same time we've got a carbon price policy in place, right? I wonder, in order to and I know En-ROADS is more of a strategic simulator, but I'm wondering, like, in order to tactically get that to work, if the funds that are sort of like had from a carbon price can get redirected to places like Brazil, where you can then give those funds to them in order to pay them to actually preserve the rainforest, because right now, like it's actually more economically sensible for them to cut it down and actually plant soy, right? And there's not like an incentive tied to carbon. In other words, they're not being paid for their trees.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
so I wonder if there might be some type of tool where you can actually model like how much weight to actually redirect that and actually pay for those trees essentially, and actually price it
Well, it's a good question. I mean, carbon markets could do that. And so then you could have, again, we're getting into policy design as opposed to modeling the impacts, because this is basically, you could do many things with the revenue from a carbon price, as you know. That's one way you could do it to impact, securing the forest for the future. Certainly that's one way to do it. Carbon markets can, be part of that, where you pay landowners to sequester carbon by not cutting down their trees. Same kind of thing. So their trees now have value in that they're removing carbon from the atmosphere in massive amounts, and they're getting paid for it. So, but yeah, that's a policy that could be put in place. And we're effectively simulating that. We're saying price carbon and protect the forests. And so that could be how you do it, but yeah. Eric, question.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask about that economic growth tab that you don't want to touch.
Sure.
Been reading up quite a bit lately on like degrowth theory.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Idea that, as long as the economy continues to grow, and even if energy becomes cheaper and renewable, they'll find new things to do with it, and
yeah,
the demand will always increase. And so I'm wondering if this model has anything to say to that idea.
Sure.
That economies should not be oriented around growth.
Yeah, let's just move let's incentivize slower growth and see what it does to the temperature. So yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah, you could certainly move the needle pretty substantially by just putting in a low growth policy. Yeah, but good luck getting reelected, I guess. I guess I don't touch that, because no politician's gonna, well, generally they don't do that and get reelected, but they could. I mean, I think they would. You could just imagine, kind of the rhetoric around any politician who says, well, let's reduce our growth to support this. Yeah, so that's why I personally don't do it. I just don't know how real it is, but yeah, it's effective. Yeah. You saw how effective it is.
But Noel, but the other problem, of course, if you can't have low growth if the population continues to increase, well, because then you are making people
sure
poorer.
Yeah.
And that's not a good policy to pursue, to make people poorer.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. So there's what low growth and low population growth does. I mean, honestly, I don't want to get too dark here, but if we don't do the right thing, we're going to end up with low growth and declining population anyway, that just because the world won't be able to support, either one anymore. So, yeah. So
you can have a de facto kind of policy choice by things like the pandemic, just shut down the world's economy.
Yeah, definitely. So.
Except that didn't actually, John, that didn't work, as we saw, unless you're going to make it permanent.
Yeah.
As a temporary measure, it only reduced greenhouse gas emissions by about 8% globally, and that was under drastic circumstances.
Yeah, and it's bouncing back. Right.
So I don't think it's a very feasible thing to do. Instead, what we need to do is change the whole system so that our energy is used more efficiently and is better energy.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put all our policies back in place that we did, and then I'm going to look at another view of that. So we're going to put a very high carbon price in place. We're going to electrify everything, and we're going to say deforestation, we're going to stop, and we're going to do that. We're going to cut down on methane. We're going to do some of that, and we'll do efficiency because that makes sense. So we do all those things. We're down to the range we want to be in. So do we want to look at impacts next? So anyway, that's a good policy. Oh, first of all, observation about this to get there. What are folks' observations just about putting these in place and landing in a safer zone? Any observations?
Well, I could start by saying that some of these things look really hard to do. For example, electrifying all the buildings are going to be really hard and expensive.
One policy is not going to do it on its own.
It's going to take a lot, right? Yeah, carbon price by itself is actually not going to get us there, but it's still the most effective and part of a mix. So yeah, I think that's another clear observation is we actually have to do them all.
Related to what Sylvia is saying, you know, there are places on the planet where there are no electrical grids, and so, you know, without an electrical grid, you wouldn't even be able to electrify any of their buildings, right?
But
True.
on the other hand, they're not contributing much to greenhouse gas emissions probably too. So it
It's great.
doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a model perspective, it's not going to move. Yeah, because yeah, to Sylvia's point,
We're the problem, not them.
right? Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I guess a couple observations. One, it's still feasible. It's still attainable. Two, I think Sylvia said it's really hard. It's going to take a lot. Like we have to do like every really smart policy that we talk about. We have to actually do every one of them. You know, because you hear policies that come into place about, hey, we're going to plant 1 trillion trees, and everyone rallies around it and says, hey, we're handling climate, but yeah, we need to plant 1 trillion trees, but we got to do everything else too. So that's another, you know, thing too. It's like there's no silver bullet, as I say. It's silver buckshot. I mean, we have to actually simultaneously do all of these things to do it. So it's really hard. It's going to take time. It is achievable. But it's and we got to do them all. Okay. Any other observations? Oh, someone asked what's the max decrease in temp that can be accomplished if we did everything? I think we're looking at it here. I mean, I could move the technology one up higher, but yeah, I don't know how attainable that really is. So I tend not to move the technology one all the way up because I call it, you know, it's kind of it doesn't really exist. We're hoping that it does. So, you know, I tend to temper that by saying, well, some technology is going to be necessary to keep us in, you know, kind of a good zone. But, you know, I take a.
What happens if you also tax coal, oil, and gas?
Yep, great question.
With the carbon price.
Yeah, it's a great question. So you want to just layer it on top of the model we have here, Eric, to see if it does anything?
I'm Gary, but yeah.
Oh, Gary, I'm sorry. I just saw Eric had his hand up. Sorry. Yeah, so I'll just tax coal, and yeah, basically by this point, coal was gone, so it's not doing much else. Because if you look at the graph above, we've already pretty much eliminated fossil fuels. So adding more to that's just piling on and not necessary. So. Yep. Eric, did you have a question?
Yeah, real quick. Does the model take into account like the possibility that innovations could, like carbon capture could be, you know, unexpectedly really successful in the next 10 years, or there might be some, you know, outlying variables that could swing it one way or another?
Well, carbon capture is model it. You can model it right in the tool if you wanted to do that. You could build a carbon capture model into the tool and see what that does. So yeah, it handles the carbon capture one, and then the other one is technology. So yeah, you can definitely model like technology is going to come in, you know, technology carbon removal, 24% of max potential is what I put. But yeah, so that's something like carbon dioxide removal technology, direct air capture, bioenergy, biochar, a whole bunch of other things that you could come up with basically, you know, agricultural soil. Oh, here's the one, agricultural soil carbon sequestration. So is in here as well. So you can see there's a number of different, you know, technological solutions that you could put into the model. Yeah,
it might be a bad question, or not. I just mean that, like, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we have made leaps in renewable energy and things that people would not have predicted 10 years ago. Yeah. And so I'm wondering, like, how much uncertainty of that variety would be brought to bear on maybe in 2030, people are like, wow, we had no idea that the max potential sequestration was actually
No,
this or something else.
Yeah, it's a great question, Eric. And I guess the way I'll answer that is they update this model as technology changes. And this is what the best modeling shows right now. But if the technology was advanced, let's say battery storage prices came down much faster than anticipated, maybe that would change the adoption rate of renewables too, right? To replace base load energy. So it's a great question though. But they're always updating the model based on the environment that we're in. Okay. Yeah, crypto coin mining. I think that's crashing on its own. That's taken care of. Yeah. All right. I'm going to pivot from this now. I think we have a good understanding. Again, the idea is like this tool is very easy to use, and you should all get the link to it and try it on your own. I'll just warn you, you could lose an afternoon very easily if you do that. But there's a lot more. There's more. So this is just like, hey, we did it. Our policies are there, but let's talk about impacts for a minute. So here we just modeled a world where we made it. The world came together. We put all these policies in place, and we landed in a good spot. So I'm going to go ahead and look at some of the impacts. They have an impacts tab here with a whole number, basically the impacts of the policy that we put in place. So temperature change you see. Let's look at sea level rise. I'm going to look at it in a couple of different ways. So here's sea level rise is business as usual. You can see it's up here 2100 around 0.7 meters, which is, a couple of feet. But what do you notice about this slope? I mean, if we get here, we're only reducing it to 0.5 meters. So 0.2 meter difference is all of the things we did ended up only reducing sea level rise by 0.2 meters. But I want you to think about the slope of the line. I mean, I think that's a big deal because this is the random year 2100 as where sea level rise is. But in the business as usual case, you can see where that slope is going. In the our model, you can see the slope is it's still trending up pretty significantly, but this one's going, a lot higher. So it does make an impact, but sea level rise is still happening. Now we have another map view that we can actually look at this. This is one of the really powerful components of this tool as well. I'm going to actually bring this out and show it larger. Let me try just larger and see. Okay, can you guys all see that still? Where do you want to see the impacts of sea level rise based on the model that we did? Someone give me, if someone would maybe call out one of their favorite. Miami. Okay. Miami, Florida. Let's see what happens here. So in 2100, Miami doesn't do so bad. Okay, you can see the blue area is where there's going to be impact. Let me zoom in a little bit here to see. So this island gets hit pretty hard, this one here as well. Miami Beach, though, you can see, look what our policy did. All the green is the land that's saved by our actions in 2100. So this is good. Maybe we should talk to some politicians in South Florida about what's going to happen, because the green area is areas that will be basically flooded, like it'll be in the ocean, right? So that's cool, right? Good thing. Antarctica. I'm not sure we have that for there. We'll see. How about we just look at what else happens on coastal areas. We have storms, right? So this is actually the calm ocean. So let's put a storm in there. Let's do storm surge. And what we'll do your EPA in a minute. Yep. What does storm surge look like in a pretty good storm? Anybody want to give me a number? How many meters of storm surge? A meter, about 3 feet. Sandy, just so you know, was 14 feet of storm surge when Sandy hit the East Coast. But let's just say a pretty hefty storm comes in with, I don't know, 2 meters or so. There's 2.5 meters of storm surge. That's what happens to Miami Beach. At that point, it's pretty much overrun with the ocean, and even inland pretty far is overrun with that storm surge. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot more ocean that's coming onto South Florida. So that's the other piece. The other really powerful piece. I'm gonna take one more view of Miami, and then we'll jump up to Erie, and then New Orleans. I'm gonna go. So when I showed you the slope of the line of sea level rise, we mentioned that it was still going up, right? In 21, we were just showing it in 2100, but it was still rising. So they know what equilibrium is, okay, for the models. They just don't know when that's going to happen. And just like imagine, like it takes a while for an ice cube to melt in warm water, so they know how far the water will rise. They just don't know the time frame, but they know. So we can show what's called equilibrium. And if we do long-term equilibrium, this is with our policies in place. This is the long-term equilibrium. This is what's going to happen to South Florida with our policies in place. You can see the green is the areas that were not underwater with our policies in place, but these are actually happening. And there's really, I don't know, our policy, this is already baked in, if you will. Like that the melting of the glaciers and the ice caps, it's got some baked in already. And you can see there's a dramatic impact. Again, timing, we don't know, but we do know that this will be the long-term equilibrium. So it could be hundreds of years, could be 1,000 years, but this is the equilibrium. So let's, let's go back. Let's go somewhere else. We'll go back to 21st century storm surge, and we're going to take a trip up to Erie, PA. And let's see, I actually don't know what this is going to look like. No, Erie does pretty good, I guess. 21st century. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna buy a house.
Yeah, house on the lake. There you go. That's what my wife and I talk about. Yeah, we'll get a house on the lake, not down the beach. New Orleans. As you probably thought, right? With a storm, New Orleans gets hit pretty hard. And if you know the I guess with no storm surge, we'll see. But you can see this model working. It's churning through a lot of data to do this. But even just the 21st century, it's getting hit hard. And we can move the year too. This is another thing about here. We can look at 2060 New Orleans, see what that might look like.
Hey, Mel, to be clear, this is actually taking all the parameters for the sliders on En-ROADS, and then it's actually mapping it with the sea level rise, right?
That's correct. Yeah, this takes into account all of them. Yeah, so this one shows that New Orleans, even with the actions that we've taken, much of the landmass surrounding New Orleans will be impacted. And of course, the long-term equilibrium is probably not a great story here. I imagine. Yeah, you can see, long-term equilibrium to New Orleans is it's not New Orleans anymore. So here's Houston, I think. So yeah, this is a pretty powerful tool. Okay. Any other questions or anyone that want to see any other areas, or did I depress everyone enough with that one? All right, I'm going to jump into some of the other impacts, which may be helpful to you as well. So we're going to go to air pollution by energy by source. This to me is this one makes me smile because this is like a co-benefit, if you will. That is PM 2.5 and PM 2.5 is the particulate matter that causes a lot of heart and lung disease and deaths in the world. And you can see, you know, we talked about it takes time to have an impact. This one has an impact almost immediately with our policies. Like coal just gets shut down. You can see the dramatic decrease in coal, which is the primary source of PM 2.5. So this saves lives. And this is really impactful. If folks want to really see like a good story and things that we can impact positively. And I will tell you, I think the carbon price is a big deal. So that much of it was the carbon price. Did you guys see that when you replay that?
Yeah, replay that.
That's what the carbon price does, just by itself. Do you know how many lives a carbon price alone saves in the world? It's really mind-boggling. Like, you know, because PM 2.5 is a killer. Not just a killer. I mean, there's the healthcare cost too, right? I mean, it is a killer, but there's a lot of, you know, healthcare impacts from it that aren't death. Let's say just quality of life and, you know, time in the hospital and medicines and asthma and the things like that. So it's a big deal. So that's a really neat story to tell.
No,
with that.
lost work days.
Let's see. We have one around additional deaths.
But that's one of the other things that the health stuff does. It's not just deaths, but it's a hit to the economy.
No, that's correct. It is.
Lost.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah, it does. It has an impact in the economy as well through, you know, loss of productivity for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. But let's look at deaths. The decrease, our policy. I'm gonna do. I can show more. Right. So this is the impact of our policies on the additional deaths from extreme heat alone, and they do it by region. Of course, in, you know, Asia, it's got the most dramatic impact, and in Southern Europe, but it really dramatically decreases the amount of deaths that occur from extreme heat. So this is, again, two impacts that are life-saving: PM 2.5 and extreme heat are ways that these policies just save human lives. Pretty neat story on both of those. This is an interesting one as well. Decrease in crop yield from temperature. This has to do with feeding the planet. And you can see we've greatly reduced the decrease in crop yield from temperature increase across, you know, corn, wheat, rice, and soybean. Dramatically decreases it. Again, these have human health impacts directly attributable. So if you've got a member of Congress who cares about food security, this might be something that you want to talk to them about. Species loss, I mean, dramatic as well, right? So these are some of the impacts. Population exposed to sea level rise. So there's a number of like really powerful impacts sliders that you can use as well. And the last one I want to show you on impacts is financial. And this one is a little bit more nuanced, and, you know, depends on your audience and how much they would gain out of this. But I'm going to bring up a couple of slides on here and talk about it. One is the total annual cost of energy. Look at that. What caused that to spike up, and what's causing that to go down in the future? So you see the total cost of energy goes up by about $5 trillion globally, but then the end of the day, it's down about 10 trillion, right? So what's causing those to happen, right? So I'm going to just move a couple sliders and we'll see. So right away, you're going to see carbon price is actually doing the damage, if you will, in the beginning, where of course energy's costs are going to go up dramatically, and that's what the argument's going to be. People are going to say, well, you're driving up the cost of energy, that's reducing the quality of life, people can't handle that. Well, as you know, we know the carbon fee and dividend. I'm going to model over here the revenue side of that story, revenue and costs from taxes and subsidies. Well, look at that. There's revenue that comes in. And that revenue is actually, it maxes out at like $7 trillion. Well, we only maxed out here. This is about a $5 trillion net difference. And this comes back to even around 2051. Well, we've actually got all of the revenue here. It's all there and more to offset this increased cost of energy. And so that's where the dividend piece comes in. It's like we're paying for it. We're leveling this out. We're taking this away. We're paying for all this by taking this revenue and giving it back to the people so that they're not impacted. We're reducing that impact so we can have it both ways if you just show it in this way. And then you're like, well, what makes energy so cheap? And well, we put these policies in place to drive energy efficiency. If we take those back out, you can see it kind of comes back to norm there, if you will. So energy efficiency just drives the cost of energy down, right? Makes sense, right? So those policies are going to help. So the story behind this financial graph is, well, these policies actually in long term, I mean, people are thinking very long term, it's going to reduce the cost of energy to society by a lot. In the near term, it's going to drive it up, but we have the money to give them to pay for it to reduce that impact. So we can solve it. It's all shown right here, the economics behind it. So anyway, I don't know if I'm reading into that too much, but this is the macro view, the big picture of the drivers that cost, the levers that are driving these are very clear from the model. The carbon price increases the cost of energy, but gives you the revenue to offset it. And the energy efficiency, naturally, long term, is going to be a benefit to society. Questions on that? Okay. All right. That's my pitch for the evening. I just want to turn it back to the audience for any other questions or discussions. And John, I actually, John, why don't you put up the last question, and then we'll just have a little bit of a debrief on that.
For some reason, I can't participate in this poll. It doesn't take my answer, but I'm determined.
I think if you're a co-host, you can't answer. Yeah, I fall into the determined category myself. So, yeah. Anybody else want to answer before we close the poll and just discuss it? Okay. Yeah, go ahead and present, I guess, the results. But yeah, basically, folks are determined and hopeful, as I guess not surprising from the audience of CCLers. That's kind of in our DNA, and it's why we do what we do. But yeah, so as a debrief, like, is there anything that surprised you from what you learned through the modeling in the impacts? Any surprises that folks want to share? Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
I thought it was so helpful to see how each thing does or does not decrease carbon emissions over time. Because I knew getting to 1.5, they say, is either difficult or impossible now, but I didn't have like a piece by piece understanding of how it all worked. And I was wondering, I mean, what you just showed there about the carbon price, making energy costs go up and then come down in the long term is so compelling. I would love, I have a lobby meeting next week. I would love to be able to show him that. And I'm not confident in my ability to use the program. I'm wondering, is there a way to get the sort of certification that you have? Is there a training for this that would maybe help us be able to use this more effectively?
Yeah, I'm what's called an ambassador, I think. And yeah, I went through a series of, I think it was like 6 or 7 training classes to do that. And yeah, please do. We want more folks to learn that tool. But if you go on to the website for En-ROADS, you'll find the training and ambassador links on there, and you could take them live with their trainers, or you could do it the recorded sessions, whatever fits your schedule, to do it as well. So yeah, and
I'll say one more thing, Noel, about that is that Dick and I took the training, but we didn't go through all the steps you had to do in order to be certified as an ambassador. So you have to you have to take a quiz, and you have to tell them that you've shown it a certain number of times.
Yeah,
but anybody can take the training.
That's correct. That's correct. Yep, you got it. Yep, and I'm also like, you know, I've done it for some congressional offices. If you need me to go, or there's a couple other ambassadors in CCL. Yeah, we'll be more than happy to do the demo for any member of Congress as well. So, yeah. John, do you have a comment?
That's what I was just going to ask, if there's En-ROADS ambassadors that would come if you couldn't learn the tool yourself. And thank you. For
yeah, sure. There's a couple of us that have done it for different members of Congress. So yeah. Anybody else have any ahas or surprises or anything they'd like to share about, or even key insights? If you have key insights that you have.
My husband is sitting here quietly in the back. What were you going to say? That it requires so much to get down to everything. That it requires everything. That's what
correct.
It really demonstrates very effectively.
Yeah, he's 100% right. Yeah, there's not one policy that's going to solve this. It's going to take every one of those really good ideas. We have to do them all in like now. Time is not our friend either. Yeah. So yeah.
So we can do it.
Yeah. So just a couple of things, like we have the tools, right? Solar and wind are getting cheaper. A lot of organizations are investing in clean technology. Different countries are, upping their game. I told you the model used to show 4.1, it's now 3.6, and they'll update that with the newer policies around the world. So yeah, there's no silver bullet. I think we learned it's going to take many actions to do it.
You can't do 1.5. He never got to 1.5.
Yeah.
1.5 is probably, my opinion, is probably not attainable, because the probability of us being able to effectively do all of these things for the entire world starting now is probably not, realistic. So 1.5 is going to be difficult, if not, almost near impossible to attain. But doesn't mean it's not like, darn, we didn't make 1.5, everything's over. Everything, every tenth of a degree that we impact from going higher than that is more livable and less impact. So
I was going to say that Dick just wrote an op-ed about research on battery technologies for vehicles, and there's really exciting work that's being done in that regard. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Dick, but if that comes on board, that will change the equations.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll accelerate the the take up of electric vehicles, when electric vehicles are a big deal in terms of this solution as well. Yeah.
But that's something that I learned in the previous one too. But if you just electrify without renewables, then fossil fuel use goes up because we haven't changed the grid. So we have to do them at the same time.
Yes, you do. In fact, I could show that in the model. You can do that. You can just electrify. Just do vehicle electrification, and you'll see fossil fuel use goes up. Absolutely, 100%. So yeah, but you have to do both. I mean, that's an argument that people make. It's like, well, we're burning coal in the grid, and that's where I plug my car into. And it's like, well, yeah, but they don't all just happen like that. You have to start now and do them both. So yes, you do. Yep. I guess one of the other things I'll share is, and we hear politicians say different things about this, but there's no solution to getting there that does not require keeping large amounts of fossil fuels in the ground. There's just no other way. That is, it's hard for politicians to say and get reelected as well, I guess, but that's the hard truth is we have to keep them in the ground. Building new infrastructure is not helpful. But we also talked about a lot of co-benefits, a lot of benefits of doing this in terms of human health and livability of the planet. And yeah, we should make sure we're always talking about those too. We're not just, it's all those other co-benefits really are effective communication tools for us to tell. So.
So if I could just talk about CCL's new priorities here, the transmission lines that they're talking about, it is really important because we've got to up the amount of electricity that we're using for all of these features. So I'm really excited about that idea that we're going to really work on that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that's where I really like the way CCL has pivoted to a number of different strategies to influence. So, and they all somehow tie into, these policies that you say we need them all. So, yep.
Eric, John has answered that question. That where to find the. You want to tell everybody, John, where to find the recording?
Yes, I'll put it online as soon as I get the recording, and I think I'll just put a link in the chat to the YouTube channel.
So thanks for that.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments, observations?
So thank you so much, Noel, for doing this. This was really fascinating, and even though I felt that I knew the model a little bit, you showed so many parts of it that I had not seen before, and especially on the impacts. That's very dramatic, and so I really appreciate the work that you did on this. And I'm thinking I invited the staff members for our lobby meeting to come to this meeting. I don't see them here, but tomorrow I will say we can have Noel Smyth give you an intro to this. So be prepared. We may be calling on you.
Sure.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. And Eric, if you're considering discussing this with your member of Congress when you meet with them, you never want to surprise them and just say, hey, we're doing this. But yeah, you can offer it up and say, hey, would you like to see a demo of a model that shows different policies and how they affect it? And then we can coordinate to do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Well,
one last question.
Yeah.
Is the M.I.T. En-ROADS, is that all peer reviewed? Who builds En-ROADS software, and does it go through a vetting process and all that good jazz?
Yeah, great question. Climate Interactive is responsible for building that. So they're an organization that I guess partners with M.I.T. to do that. But all of the models that they use, so they're basically an aggregation of peer-reviewed models. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate this. And we especially thank Noel for his great expertise. And let's do more things together as throughout the state. This is really great to have all of you from the other chapters join our December meeting. And we really appreciate your being here. Well, let's try to do some more and invite each other to the meetings. That would be very, very helpful for all of us. So thank you so much. Thank you, Karen and John, for your technological support. Thank you, Lisa, for yours as well. And we'll see you again on Zoom, I hope.
Bye all. Have a good night.
Very good.
Thank you, Noel.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Randy, for coming. I just saw you there.
Hey, thanks.
All the way from New York.
Yeah, I thought